minutes long, and we are talking about essentially why BSV will eventually overtake BTC. So in that video, I did an introduction, and I essentially explained what they were and how not a lot of people know about it. Like, for example, Robert Kiyosaki doesn't know that BTC is no longer actually Bitcoin anymore. But I'm also explaining why it's important, why it's not just what the market decided on. I'm explaining why the double spend checking algorithm specifically will actually decide which one wins in the end. So we're talking about Sybil attacks. So BSV has a lot of edges because it's kind of like airports. You have every time you add an edge or a node, sorry, they can afford to add all these edges because of the fact that they have all these fees that they can charge. Whereas with BTC, it's going to get a little more difficult. But as a caveat to that, maybe you do have a way where you can distribute this information more quickly. Okay. But I was circling these saying, okay, doesn't matter if you say you start here. Okay. The double spend checking algorithm is different than a data propagation algorithm. So instead of just starting here and saying, hey, I want to propagate a video, I want to propagate news, okay, and then sending it here, 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 and then to this node, and then to this node, okay, and then you're done, okay. Double spend checking is different from that because it has to do something special with the whole network. It actually needs a network that looks more like this because it needs all the information from the whole network to be distributed everywhere else very quickly and efficiently. So for example, if I have a report to this, a wallet to this node and a report of the same wallet to this node, okay, I'm glad that this is connected here and here at the same time because now I know that there's a double spend that's going to be prevented. I'm going to know whether the double spend is sent or not, which is important in certain cases. It's also important for the nodes themselves to incentivize to create these blocks in a timeful manner. So even if you say you have a lot of connections in BTC, right, between all these nodes, say they can afford it, it's still going to be difficult to propagate all the information because now you have to flow all this information from every node to every node, okay, and you have more nodes, so it's actually easier to do it with less nodes that get paid more with fees than more nodes which are not getting paid with fees. And eventually there's not going to be any block reward for mining, so you're going to have to rely completely on fees. Now, which do you think is going to make more sense, to have an unbounded number of transactions that are being paid for and collect fees from that if you're a node and there's less nodes to compete with, or do you want more nodes, 1,000 times as many nodes to compete with, but at the same time there's only a small number of transactions that can exist, so you can't collect fees from these nodes? So if you think about it, these guys are going to make a lot of money in the long run potentially, and these guys are not going to make a lot of money because they don't have any sustainable way to make money. And then if you try to build something like Lightning that depends on it, well, if it's got to settle on BTC, well, it's going to be difficult to settle. So it's going to have to become its own currency, its own network. So they're going to call things Bitcoin that are not Bitcoin because they don't even settle on Bitcoin. Okay, it's not even just that it's using a different protocol. It's that it's not even using it at all at some point. They're just, in theory, settling on something that really, quite frankly, is it's not going to work very efficiently. So now Lightning nodes might say, hey, we're going to pay higher fees because we are collecting fees ourselves or something like that. And I guess they can try to do that, but they're still going to end up having to do all this work anyway. So you might as well just do things on chain directly. You don't have to shift coins or anything like that with original protocol. So BSV, because it allows for microtransactions and as many transactions as you want, and it allows you to do all this other utility, it's going to end up being more sustainable because it's not going to be cyber attacked easily. It's not going to shut down easily. You're going to have these nodes which are supported by all the nodes they're connected to. They're going to be supported by enough fees. Okay. They're not going to easily be cybled because you'd have to communicate with all the nodes at the same time. Whereas here you can try to split it. You can try to confuse the network by giving a lot of different nodes different information at the same time. You can't do that with these because you try to give them all different information. They're gonna still just see what their neighbors that they're used to communicating with are deciding on for transactions that they've seen first, and they're going to go with that, and they're going to sort of ignore the attacks in a way, because as soon as they start seeing something that's giving them information that conflicts, they're probably not going to really respect that attacker. Whereas here, they're going to see so many transactions coming from so many different places. Eventually, you get to the point where even though you have a lot of hash power, you're still going to have a lot of dispute of which transactions you've seen first. So hash power doesn't dictate everything. It can't really dictate everything because it can't override signatures, and it can't override a full fingerprint, a full SHA-256 block. Hash power just doesn't do that. It only works as an anti-spam. So it's only these nodes' way of trying to put their voice into the network, into compete with the rest of the network. So wallets don't need any hash power to present their transactions. So whether they go with a particular transaction first or the other one, you might say, okay, well, that's fine. They can just go with whatever one they've seen. That's true. They can. And that's what the original protocol does. But when you have small blocks, remember, that's just going to make it more difficult for your transaction then to be considered valid. So you're not going to get that zero conf. You're not going to get that, response back. You're going to have to sit there and wait for blocks to be made. And then you might even get to the point where you have to wait for a couple blocks. And they tell you have to do that already. But again, real Bitcoin, original protocol, you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about it, because as soon as you send it, you see if you see like 10 confirmations, you know that it's secure. Whereas with BTC, you might see a few confirmations from some nodes, but it's not really enough to prove to you what's actually going on. It's not enough to tell you that it's actually that safe, that secure, because they're not going to necessarily have all the bandwidth for it. So yeah, BTC could be worth $180,000 a coin, and BSV could be worth maybe $15 a coin. But which one's going to support more transactions per dollar? I mean, which one's going to support it? It's going to be BSV. So in BSV, if you have all this hash power and you still can't Sybil attack it, that speaks something. Okay, that tells you something, because it says that even if the market is all investing and pouring their income into this other network, it still can't actually attack the real Bitcoin, because that's how well the real Bitcoin is actually designed. That's how it actually works. It's not just about whether you just have more hash power. It's also about how the system itself functions altogether. So maybe we can, instead of just talking about technical stuff, maybe we can talk about like psychology, okay? Because you have different camps here, okay? You have like two dimensions, right? You have people who say that BTC is Bitcoin. And then you have people who don't. And then here you're going to have people who say that utility is worthwhile. And then you're going to have people who say utility doesn't matter, it's just market, right? Okay. So you're going to have these people. So you're going to have really good value investors that'll say, oh, yeah, utility is important. But then they'll say, like, BTC is Bitcoin, right? And we know there's some people like that. We also have some people that say BTC is Bitcoin, but then market matters, right? We have those people. So you can think of who that is. I don't know. Maybe Michael Saylor is one of those. You can look up value investors for this one, right? But then you have these different, probably BSVers, but you kind of got a range of them. So you have like genuine, legit. Okay, let's not use the word legit. Let's say programmers or something. BSVers who code, things like that. They're coding, they're building things. They want to learn how to use it. Or you have business using transactions specifically. Okay. So not just any business, not just a financial business, but specifically businesses that want to use transactions because the fees are lower. Right. But then you have some people who are BSVers, but they just want, they want number go up, right? So they're called altcoiners, sometimes by BTCers. Now, that camp actually I feel bad for because they're going to want to buy BSV sometimes and then they're going to want to get rich and it's probably not going to go up when they want it to. And so it's probably not good to try to stick around here too long because playing the market is one thing. Building on something is different, right? Like I can invest in something as something I believe in, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pay me back. I can also play the market and invest in and gamble and do things that don't help anyone, but ultimately they could be things that don't help that give me money but don't help anyone else. They're not utility. So that could be a market investor or something like that. So we know obviously Michael Saylor, you got these other guys, right? And then you got like Dave Ramsey, right? He is probably level-headed when it comes to most finance stuff, but then he thinks that BTC is Bitcoin. And the problem with that is he doesn't understand the computer science behind it. So he doesn't understand that it's no longer being represented correctly when you see all these markets, when you see all these names, when you see all these ticker symbols. He doesn't know what it is anymore. Okay. So, and I was going to use that one investor, not Dave Ramsey, but I think you guys know who I'm talking about. One of the best value investors in the world. So psychologically, we have these different camps going on. And it's interesting to see like what people think and what they talk about because they seem to not understand that it matters whether you have utility, but it also matters how you name something to know what you're talking about. So utility utility is part of reality. Utility is how things work. Without utility, like Haskell, for example, it was common to think that it didn't have utility, actually, which is funny because I was a big Haskell fan, but it used to be that like C, C++, there's a lot of practical languages, and then you have something that's theoretical, but it doesn't seem to like it actually does something useful. But here's the thing, it actually does. It just takes time. It just is hard to develop. Haskell has an advanced type system. So when you actually do use it, it works very well. It gets rid of bugs. It helps you to create software that functions dependably. So one time I looked at a MongoDB stock and I noticed that it actually went up more than all these other common stocks. And I had specifically thought I liked it before that only because they specifically were using Haskell. So I thought, hey, if they're using Haskell, they must know what they're doing. So it's the same with like a company that's using BSV. If there's a company that's using BSV to actually accomplish something, to get some sort of task done, like, I don't know, certifying files or things like that, I would be much more willing to sort of bet on them or depend on them or sort of invest into them than I would some company that's maybe using Cardano or Ethereum or something else, because those companies are going to have trouble with paying for the transaction fees, trying to get things properly secured. You know, you don't have a foundation that's solid. If they change a protocol, you could lose data. If something happens where things are done differently, you don't you don't have the dependability. Whereas with BSV, you have dependability. Protocol never changes. Nobody's interested in changing it who's using it, because they know that you can update the software that you're using. You can update network. You can update uh, hardware and how everything uses it. But you don't need to update the protocol, because the protocol has the foundational elements, kind of like how a Turing machine has its foundational completeness, or lambda calculus has its foundational thing, right? Calculus of inductive constructions uses lambda calculus, but nobody says, hey, we need to update lambda calculus, we need to change it. Nobody does that. We just study it more. We just find out more about it. We just build more abstractions on it, but we don't ever change it fundamentally. In fact, I even came up with a new syntax for it, but I'm not changing the actual lambda calculus structure itself, the base model itself and how it works. I'm just making it more accessible. I'm making it more transparent in a way. So like you could actually swap out SHA-256 with a bigger hash and you wouldn't change the actual fundamental underlying protocol of Bitcoin and how it works, because you just swapped out a hash, right? So that's just an example of something that you could change that almost seems like it's fundamental, but it's not really fundamental because it's not changing how the overall protocol works. It's just changing a detail, right? It's just changing something that doesn't change how the system actually functions, right? When you introduce SegWit, when you introduce these other things that interfere with opcodes and stuff, that changes how Bitcoin functions. When you decide to limit the block size, that actually changes how the network structure and everything functions, and how the nodes will grow. Um, so when is BSV going to go up and BTC going down, right? So someday, right, BSVers see it this way. They see that someday, right, this could be like 2070 or something like that. Who knows? I'm not going to claim. Could be in the next year. I don't know. But the point is that we see it this way because there doesn't seem to be a lot of options for BTC. You'd either have to decide that you're going to change your mind and you're going to increase block size, or you're going to basically have to inflate and allow there to be more BTC, like change from 21 million to something else that's bigger so that you can reward miners. Because ultimately, you're going to have this, the block reward is going to decrease to the point where after 200 years, it's just nothing. And then you're going to have to decide how the fees are going to get paid. Are you just going to leave the network at a standstill where nothing's being updated, no transactions are being done? Because if that's happening, let me read some of these. Hold on a second, guys. I'm back here. So let me read some of these. Hola, okay, what are you explaining? Okay. Oh, somebody said BSV is king, and some people ask, what is BSV? BSV is just the ticker symbol for what I would say is the original Bitcoin, which is version 0.1. So it's Bitcoin, right? But it's prior to SegWit. So it's got no SegWit, right? So no update of that, no Taproot. Okay, it's the same protocol that was BTC. So it's the same as BTC. I'm going to say BSV is, it's Bitcoin, it's no SegWit, no Taproot, it's BTC before 2017. So before 2017, if they called it Bitcoin, that's just exactly what BSV essentially is, because its address is 1 ... So if you look at BSV, it has the same addresses as original Bitcoin from 2009. They're just using a different ticker symbol. And so therefore you got a lot of harassing. Basically, I want to just say that they're liars, but they basically say that BSV is a fork. They're saying, oh, it's just another altcoin that's copying Bitcoin. No, it's not. It's the original. And the current ticker symbol BTC is now being used by financial institutions to refer to the SegWit and the Taproot, the changed version with the small blocks. So there's people that'll say, oh, if it's not small blocks, it's not real Bitcoin because it's going against decentralization. But decentralization, as you can see in my other live streams, can be defined as how many edges do you have to cut on the network? How hard would it be to cyber the network? And if you go by that definition, then BSV would actually be more decentralized. So that's basically what BSV is for those people asking still. And for someone who said BSV is king, they're probably thinking of this, they're somewhere on that right side of that chart from earlier, or there's, but they don't necessarily know when the price is going to go up and BTC's price is going to go down. Although I did actually predict basically that it was going to go down on October 10th because I knew, or I was pretty sure that it was going to go down, because I felt like those legal notices were specifically just reclaiming ownership in a way, saying they already possess the keys, but they're just showing like, hey, this was already my $20 bill, and I'm not going to claim that. I'm just going to say I found this $20 bill, which I know is mine, but I'm going to say, hey, I just found it technically, and anyone who claims it, who can prove that this is theirs, you can take it now. And you have until October, originally 5th, but they changed it to 10th. What happened on October 10th? The prices crashed. So I essentially could have, if people knew that or even thought that, they could have shorted it. But I'm not too big into doing futures and all that stuff. So, but somebody could have made a lot of money. Somebody could have made millions of dollars if they just knew that at the right time. So anyway, I think it's a smart amount to sell too, because it's not too much and it's not too little. It's sort of the right. You can let the price triple and then sell that same amount again, and you still got plenty to go. Just put it that way. So, in fact, you could make all your BTC back if you. but I'm not going to get into that too much. So we have all these chains. So remember, if you have a wallet, an address from like say 2015, you have an address wallet, and now you got all these different branches. Like you got BTC, as they call it now. You got BCH, you got BSV, and then you got all these other ones. Okay, so if you had 5 Bitcoins over here, now you actually have 5 of each of these. Okay, so the reason why I want to point this out and just remind everyone is that don't just move around, don't just sell, don't just say, oh, I got 5 BTC, I'm going to sell it now, and then get rid of your address. Okay, you still have 5 BCH, 5 BSV, 5 of all these other things in that same wallet, in that same address, if you have that same private key, because it's prior to here. Okay, so there's going to be people that sell it and then they think their wallet's empty because they're not paying attention. They don't understand that they own all of these other things. And these exchanges are not on your side. They won't tell you that, you know, they're going to collect their BSV when they find out what's going on. And then they're going to make you sign the terms and conditions and all that stuff and say, oh, yeah, it's okay if you just keep all the BSV. They're going to try to keep it for you and say, oh, we're just getting rid of that because it's just a toxic altcoin. But they're actually going to keep it because they're going to realize that it's worth more in the long run. It's going to be eventually worth more because it works extremely well. It's very functional. And if that's true, and it's true that market eventually follows value, then what must happen is eventually a BSV should be worth a few $1 million. So I'm just going to put that out there. I'm just going to say that it's all based on if those things are true. So, and we don't know when that's going to happen either. So it could be a very long time. So don't get mad if it doesn't happen, because I'm here to talk about building businesses and using utility. I personally think it's wisest to assume that the price will never go up. And if your business can build on, okay, so let's say this is BSV's price. So here we go. So BSV price, okay, time. Okay, so this is 2025. Say this is like 2080 up here, okay, right? Some people want it to go up, right? But what if the BSV price, let's say it's $5 here, okay? Or let's say we're going to say it's $25 now, and this is $5. Okay, let's say the price of BSV just did that. Okay. We're going to pretend that this is the price of BSV. I'm going to make sure that I'm still live streaming here. Okay. So how many people I got? I got 5 people, 6 people. Let's say that the price of BSV goes down to $5. This is where you separate the utility BSVers from the market BSVers, okay? Market BSVers are going to be the group of people that says, I don't like that. I don't want to buy it. I don't want anything to do with it. Which they're correct in the sense of buying it and just holding it. They're actually correct. I'm not telling them that they're wrong. But when they make the mistake of saying, oh, BSV is garbage, it's useless, that's where I say, not quite, because it's not actually just about this. Okay? If you can make a company that uses BSV for microtransactions, for services, say you have logistic warehouses that are communicating with each other, and even if you knew that this was going to happen, the price of BSV is just going to slowly drop from $25 to $5 over a long period of time. first of all, even though it's dropping in price, well, so is the US dollar. This is probably slower than that, right? But people are still using the US dollar all the time, right? Visa and MasterCard function as businesses which facilitate doing transactions with US dollars, and they make a profit by doing that. They also get people debt and things like that. So these financial institutions, they're still using something that is doing this, is losing value over time. So it's not about buying and holding, because you wouldn't do that with dollars, and yet people want dollars all the time because of what they can use it for. So BSV, if you can do microtransactions with very low transaction fees, you're going to get to the point where you're going to have these businesses that they want to use it. So they're going to, first of all, they're going to have at least some supply, even if it's a little bit. They're going to need at least a little bit of supply to actually do these transactions. But not only that, they're going to be making profits because they're spending less on transactions. They're spending less on energy, and they're being more energy efficient. So that everything's working out better for them for using that. So if you think about it, in theory, this is why I'm saying market would eventually have to, if there's enough businesses that want BSV because of that, then the price would probably actually go up instead. So this is why we got to be paying attention to these other variables, not just what the price is right now. Look at how many companies are using BSV right now. I'm going to give you guys one more chart about this, at least. So here we go. We're going to have companies, number of companies posted on chain. Okay. So this is 1,000. This is 100. Let's do it logarithmic. This is 1. 2025, right? No, let's do 2015, 2025, 2035. Okay. Now, back in 2015, I don't think anyone was necessarily doing, maybe exchanges were, so you might be, down here, right? 0 companies were actually using the utility. We're going to say aside from exchanges, pretty much no one, right? But now we have about 2 companies that are, if you go on chain and look who's posting, we have a couple companies that are actually using the blockchain like consistently every day, right? So if we're here, that's actually progress because at least we're using it. I mean, think about it. A company could either decide to use the blockchain or they could just use their own database. Which one is cheaper? If you use a blockchain, you have the potential of other people helping you. If you have a database, you still have to pay $20,000 or whatever it is for servers. But if you run one BSV node, it doesn't matter if the rest of the network stops using BSV, you can still update your own transactions. You can still update your own chain, and your data will still be updated. So look, imagine if we're up here like this. Okay. Now this is where BSV is $25. Okay. Now that's, say, 2 companies using it. Now imagine 100 companies or 1,000 companies in 2045 are using BSV, and they're companies that are depending on it. Okay, so now we're not just talking about one company, one trucking company, one shipping company, one logistics, one computer software company, whatever it is. In this case, it's certification companies that are starting off, but you can do a lot more. You can do logistics, you can do printing 1 billion QR codes, whatever it is, and tracing things around. Okay, maybe we have more than 2. Maybe there's 3 or 4 companies, but not consistently posting on chain. Okay, consistently posting is what's going to pay network, remember, because we got to pay transaction fees. So if we're not paying thousands of dollars in fees every day, it's not going to be helpful to the nodes. It's got to be a lot of money. It's got to be a lot of transactions. It can't just be like 1 or 2 horses tracking whether they got their medicine once a year. It's got to be more than that, right? So 1,000, 100, that's a lot more companies than just like 2 companies. What's going to happen to the BSV price then? Again, just like October 10th, I said the price of all the like BTC could go down. I don't know. And it did. If you got 1,000 or 100 companies using BSV, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more demand for the supply. We'll just put it that way. And plus, you're running out of supply a lot more by then, too. You're literally only mining tiny bits after that point. So, that's significant. Plus, you have the proof of utility. Because it's not until the nodes are getting more from fees than they are from mining. Because whenever you have, when you still have this thing, right? We're on this teeter-totter thing. We're on this like thing that looks like it's a needle balancing, and you got like reward, and then you have fee. Okay. And as long as this is going down here, as long as people think that it's like this, where it's just, it falls to one side, it's going to stay on one side, we're going to have this confusion because that's not how it works, right? It's more like, if anything, it's more like this. It's more like you have a ball, I guess. I'm just thinking here. I don't know. You have a ball, you have reward, and then you have, let's see, what would be the fee thing to get you back up? You have a little, gas station. Whatever it is, right? You have something where this thing can power itself when it gets down here, right? Fees. And then when the reward isn't there, it's got to propel itself, right? And it's going to propel itself very quickly with the fees. So as long as people think that it's just about this, it's, oh, we just got to keep mining and mining and mining because there's less and less and less and less, and it's going to get more scarce and we're going to get more money. That's not how it works, though, because that only goes so far, and then the price of it has to eventually level off somewhere because you only have so much GDP. So what do you do after that? What do you do when the amount of energy that you put in, it costs more than how much you get for the BTC is worth coming out? And then not only that, but for a whole year. And then not only that, but for a whole 10 years. And then not only that, but for a whole 100 years. Well, eventually you're going to get to the point where it's going to basically look like it's an infinite number of years out that it would take for the BTC's price to finally go up high enough to pay you back what it costs to do the mining. So eventually mining is just going to balance, it's just going to balance out and consume energy like a pyramid scheme. It's just going to do its thing, and it's going to have to level out somewhere where it's just not worth it for most energy. You'd have only specialized miners who think that's worth it. Okay. And then you're going to have fees, which are worth it, but they're going to be like airports. So it's still going to be hard to compete because you're going to have all this infrastructure. You're going to have networking. You're going to have the data storage. You're not even going to be doing mining because you're going to partially construct a block and then you're going to publish it. And then all the miners who used to be BTC miners are going to complete that block because they're going to know that's how I get paid now. I don't get paid from BTC anymore. I get paid from finishing BSV blocks, just checking nonces for BSV blocks, and I get paid for that. And guess who's not gonna? I'm not gonna question whether that's gonna happen because that's a vicious market. So it doesn't matter how many people hate Craig Wright or hate BSV or hate all of this stuff. There's gonna be people. There's gonna be miners that are gonna be wanting to complete those blocks. Just saying. If it pays more, they're going to do it. They don't care. They're already paying enough as it is, right? They're going to want, if you get paid 1,000 times, to do something, and you're just they think that's just a fork. It doesn't matter if they think it's a fork. Even if they think it's a fork, they still think it's legitimate enough where you can mine it if you want to. And if they get paid 1,000 times as much to do that, they'll do it. So if it's more profitable, that's why the profitability, I'm not surprised that it's always close, because it should always be close, because it's always a market. It's a big market. So it's never going to sustainably be that big of a difference in profitability to mine one versus another. And if you think about that, what does that mean for BTC? That means whoever's paying you in fees have to pay a lot in fees, right? Because either you're accepting 100,000 fees or you're accepting 10 fees. And if the 10 fees equals the 100,000 fees, those 10 fees have to be a lot. So they have to be paying a lot. What else can we talk about here? I want to see the comments here. You guys know that I started this video with a 5-minute video. Scott Gavin said, give my brother a shout out. His name is Milo. Okay. So Milo, there's your shout out, Milo. And who is it? Scott Gavin. I'll put that. Okay, so Scott Gavin said that he has a brother named Milo. He wants me to shout him out, so I'll just do it for fun, because there's only a few people that watch my channel. So there you go. Somebody please somewhere message him and tell him that I shouted him out at 45 minutes in, or whatever it is, 42 minutes in. So, yep. All right, somebody comment and tell me, what am I forgetting? What am I needing to talk about with BSV? Is there anything that I need to talk about? Okay, so comment now. What else do I need to do? What else do I need to talk about to explain what's actually going on with BSV? Or is there nothing else to do? Nothing else to explain? Anybody have anything? Anybody have an idea? Yes, no, maybe so. It says 2 people are watching. Two people are watching. Anybody want to comment? No? Okay. Well, I don't know. I think that's about all I needed to say, though. I'm just trying to give a perspective. Okay. Now, here's another thing that I didn't mention. If you own BSV, okay, if you own okay, and you're about cut even where you don't want to buy or sell because you're not making enough income to buy more, but you're also not making too little where you need to like sell it to get by, but you want to make a profit and you don't know if the price will drop down. And you also don't want to wait forever until you're 80 years old, right? How much should you sell and when? Okay. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm just going to say what I do, because I'm not going to say this is financial advice, right? But if you have an E to the power of something for growth rates of exponentially growing things. So If BSV goes up exponentially, you want to play along with it, just like you could have with it earlier. I'm saying it earlier because BTC was what BSV is now, and people could have done what I'm about to tell you, right? So you're going to have about 6% of assets sold every, and I'm going to say about 3 times, because I'm going to round up from 2.7. So that means if you have 100 BSV at, let's say they're $10 a coin, okay, then sell and have 94 at $30, okay, then sell 6 more, which would be 88, right, at $90. You see where this is going? You're still going to have 82. What's 3 times 90? 270? Now, if the price crashes, you still made a decent amount, because what you played, the line that you played for risk, was that you actually did sell some when it was getting higher. So you didn't lose out on that, but you also didn't lose out. I mean, you could have sold all of them, but what if it goes back up? You don't know if that's going to happen. So this is the way to, if you're going to follow an exponential curve, right? So we're going to keep following this, right? Down here, we're going to say, what's 3 times 270? You could say around $800, $900, whatever. So let's say you do 800, right? Sell 6 more, you're at 76. Okay, so if you had 100 BSV at $10, you would have already sold all this. 6 times that, 6 times that, 6 times that, and 6 times that. You would have made thousands of dollars. And you'd also have some spending money kind of along the way. And you'd still have more than 3/4 of your BSV left. And you can keep tripling that. And by the time you sell all of it, it's going to be in the hundreds of millions. Okay, so that's why I'm saying, just try to remember this little magical rule of thumb. I'm not saying you have to use those exact numbers. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, if you don't have a good plan, this is what I would essentially do myself if I didn't have an otherwise good plan, because there's a little bit of math behind it that says this will work whether the price goes up or if it goes down again after it goes up some, or if it goes up more. Either way, if it goes up some, whether it goes back down or goes back up more, this will basically be there for you. Now, it depends on your income, because if you can afford to invest in something that's growing faster, then you should do it. If you need the money to do something else, you might want to take out, more, because it depends on what. This is assuming if your income is stable, and by the time you start selling, it's no longer worth it to buy more. It's better you make more money selling it at the rate that it's going up, basically. So if not, then you might as well just keep buying at these prices. So if you have a plenty of income, you could still be buying at these prices and you wouldn't care to sell it, because the rate at which your income is coming in is still not greater than this. This is when you start doing this, not at a specific price, but you start doing this when the rate at return is more than what you have on your income. And your income can change, it's a variable. But let's say you sell 6 more, right? What's 3 times 800, right? We can just round up to 2,500, right? So now you get to sell 6 Bitcoins for $2,500. You get to make over $10,000 but you still have 70% of your real Bitcoins left, and they're still there even if the price gets really high. So you don't have to be suffocating yourself being poor. So you can wait again for it to triple. So it say $7,500. You sell 6 more, you have 64, right? That's more than half, right? So you still have more than half your Bitcoins, but you get to now you get like $50,000 almost from all your Bitcoins that you've sold so far before the price has gone high. And this is basically like maybe somebody doesn't really even have an income, right? They could do something like that at this point. Or if they're not, best thing to do is to keep reality in check, right? So you don't want to be spending. It's not always good to. It's always good to remember Robert Kiyosaki's advice, which is you want cash flow. You don't want cash normally to come out of your pocket and not to be coming in. You want it to be coming in normally, but rarely coming out with your setup. Okay, we can keep going if we want. So 58, right? What's 3 times that, right? Who knows? 2,300. 23,000. Sorry, somewhere around there. So it doesn't matter if you really round it, probably, because it's just an estimate. If you want to do it exact, you'd probably use E instead of 3 times. Okay, you sell 6 of these. Okay, it's not exactly 6%. It would be some other number, but it was close to 6, right? So 23,000, right? If you sell 6 times 23,000, you just made $100,000. So you didn't even sell half your Bitcoins. You still have more than half of them, but now you have a paid off house completely. You don't have a mortgage. You're already retired. Okay. So if you're and it's a logarithmic scale. So we're not saying, oh, half of it is retired. Now the other half is for spending. No, the other half is going to be a lot more money. Now that's when you become a millionaire. Okay. Then these numbers start getting really big. And it's going to be nothing, right? Right? Because think about that. 52. So you still have more than half of your Bitcoin. And what is this times 150,000 each? Okay, so now you're almost a millionaire. I mean, after selling all of it, maybe, but 52, 150,000 times 6. Okay. So 300,000 times 3. That's 900,000. That's basically $1 million almost. So you didn't even sell half your Bitcoins. And in one step, you almost go from the difference between broke and a millionaire. So what do you think the numbers are going to be after that? I mean, they just get bigger, right? And you still have more Bitcoins that you can sell or whatever at that point. So you're at the point where you could literally just live off interest and then hold on to them longer if you wanted to because you're comfortable. Or you could maybe just wait a little longer and sell them at an even higher price or whatever, you're comfortable at that point because you're already a millionaire. Just a thought, right? I'm not telling you guys what to do. I'm just saying this potential, right? It's the potential of BSV. Okay. So is there anything else? Is there anything else we can talk about when it comes to BSV? Anything else? Anything else we can talk about when it comes to Bitcoin? You can put some away. I would recommend what you could do because you have text BSV, right? Okay. You have paper wallets. You have other things like Rock Wallet. You have browser wallets. Okay, you have cold wallets. Then you have social media. You have tree chat. You have memo.sv. My recommendation for this, okay, things like text BSV, tree chat, memo SV, okay, I recommend splitting either like 50-50 or 30-30-30, whatever. Splitting it. Why? Because you're not going to regret if you have $1 billion asset. You don't care too much. Yes, you care. But even if you won $500 million, if I give you 100% chance of winning $500 million or 50% chance of winning $1 billion, you might as well take the 500 million and know that you're going to have it rather than picking the billion and then, oops, we flipped it. It was tails instead of heads. Okay. If you ask me, would you want 100% chance you get 500 million or 50% chance you get $1 billion? In my situation, okay, I'm going to pick the 500 million because I know that I'd be happy. I'd be more happy to get the 500 million knowing that I could have possibly gotten the billion and not took the chance than getting zero, right? It's worth getting zero and knowing, well, if I did just taken the 500 million, I wouldn't have been in this situation. So, so what I'm saying is, my recommendation is when you guys start using BSV, mix it, right? So mix, so like 33%. This is what I would say. So either do fit if you don't. It depends if you're a giver or not, right? I like to be a giver. It's nice to share things with others. So you could give 33% of it away, save 33%, and then use 33% on things like this. So this is use, right? Use, right? Save, save. You would use something like text BSV to give, maybe, or you can kind of use it, I guess. Paper wallets, that's like a way to save or give, maybe, because you could put the private key in a piece of paper and then hand it to someone and say, hey, open this in 5 years, right? This can do all, essentially. Save, give, right? We'll just say save, give because you're not really using it. So use, or if you don't want to give, you can do 50% save and 50% use, okay? Why do I say that? Well, I just explained to you the 500 million versus $1 billion thing, okay? It's not necessarily about risking not keeping it all, but it's about the idea that if you're not using it, well, then it's not going to grow, first of all. So you're not helping the ecosystem. But there's also the sense that you're not getting involved in the ecosystem as well. So you're not actually opening up networking doors with others. So if you think about it, as long as you saved, say, half or 1/3, you're still going to have a decent amount of whatever you otherwise would have. So if you have $500 billion worth of Bitcoin, you could have said, oh, I saved all 500, but you're 60 years old and you didn't do anything with your life. Or you could say, hey, I have $250 billion worth of Bitcoin, but I also have been involved with the ecosystem and the community the whole time. You see? So, and you've given some away and you have all these people that are your friends and have worked with you and all this other stuff. And you've maybe you've invested or created companies and things like that. So if you just use half, that's okay. It's like the guy who bought a pizza with Bitcoins. He would have been fine if instead of using 100%, like all of his Bitcoin to buy a pizza, if he still bought a pizza, he could have been the pizza guy who bought Bitcoin, right? With pizza with Bitcoin. But if he'd only used half of his Bitcoin that he had paid for, right? Not that, then don't use another half again. But if you buy more, use half of that extra amount that you bought, right? If he only spent half of it all the time total from the total amount that he got, if he only spent half of it, he would have been involved in the community. He would have done cool things and bought pizza, but he still would have had the other half. So he'd still be happy because he still would have a decent amount to then do my earlier financial plan that I was talking about how to sell. So what I'm saying is this whole save thing, this part right here, all right, that save is specifically talking about, it's like referring to what I was explaining earlier with the tripling, and you saw the 6%. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So that's different than use. Okay. Use doesn't mean spend as in sell off. It means spend as in spend it as a cash, as a currency, right? Give doesn't mean you sell it and then give somebody cash. It means you're actually giving them the Bitcoin so that the supply is still out there, without you reducing devaluing it, or you're still having someone that you're networked with some supply. So someone you know now has Bitcoin, and they might, who knows if they're going to help you in the future, but they're going to be more involved with it. They're going to know about it. They're going to be like, wow, this guy, and you're going to be, part of that system when it actually does grow. You see what I mean? There's so much more to being involved with stuff than just your immediate profits. There's also, when you create things that are useful, you have a long-term profit from it too. You have meaning from it too. Okay, so we got all that. What else? What else could we be talking about? Because I didn't know I'd be going into like ideas of how to invest in all this stuff. Anybody have an idea? Only one guy watching still. Guy, girl, whatever it is. It only says there's one. Okay. So yeah. All right, guys. So I've done a lot of charts. I've explained a bunch of things, but I've taken time to just kind of keep going. And I did a live stream, so I wouldn't have to run out of phone memory. And it's been fun. But for 4 months, 5 months now, I actually quit my job I was doing in another city. So things have been harder for me. But I raised a whole litter of puppies. I can show you. You guys know this, though. You've seen pictures, you've seen videos. And here we got the ranger, the cool dude. Yeah. You're a chuppy, aren't you? Look how big he is. This guy was born in what, like July? And he's already like 25 pounds almost. Like, this guy's huge. So they all have families. I took 2 strays from the population, and I did not add any strays to the population. All puppies have a home with a family or whatever it is, family farm or a old lady or whatever it is. And mom's now fixed after she had 2 litters. I found her when she was pregnant, and she also had 1 litter since then. And he's the firstborn son of the second litter here. So, and he's got a half brother who's also a firstborn son of a previous litter, who's not too far from where I live. Could probably get there in like 20 minutes. So, yep. So we went from talking about why BSV will succeed to maybe, I guess, investment advice that I thought of basically 2 years ago. I made these little cards. I was going to explain to people like 2 years ago, this is how the rate at which you should sell BSV off. But I think we'll slowly uncover that when the time's right. Because again, business really should come first in Bitcoin. It really should. It's not meant to be a pyramid scheme. It's meant to be cash. It's meant to be future. All right, guys. I'll see you. It's fun.